Right, today I'm going to give you a lesson in setting up successful tanks.
Great success.
So there is an art to it, and it's advice which I'd wish I had when I first started, but there's 3 P's. So they all begin with P, and it's how you get the best looking tank you possibly can, how you can be successful from the get-go, because a lot of people make errors when they're new to the hobby early on. They can be catastrophic, and it can put you off continuing with this hobby further on down the line, and a lot of people give up on it, which is sad. But I'm going to give you some advice today on how to get it all right from the beginning. Right, so I'll start by saying everyone is going to make mistakes in this hobby, whether you're a beginner, experienced. Mistakes are going to happen. I still make them to this day. It's a consistent journey of learning. We change what type of tanks we keep, what type of fish we keep. So that's what makes it so fun. We're constantly learning, but you're going to make mistakes, and sometimes they can be a little bit catastrophic as well, which can put people off. However, there's 3 things that I do that I abide by now I'm more experienced in this, which help me to keep successful tanks. So the first one is, the first P we're going to talk about is patience. So patience is so important when you're setting up tanks and you want to be successful. Now, some of these things might not apply to everybody, because I think there's a degree of, when you're first starting off in the hobby, you don't want to spend an awful lot of money, and you don't want to get all the top of the range stuff, because you're still testing the water on whether it's something that you're going to actually want to get into, or whether it's going to be a hobby for you that's going to last for the rest of your life. So I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way in regards to you need to spend a lot of money to be successful. You really don't. You can go out and buy sort of cheap things and set up a little tank and make sure it's going to be right for you. But I mean, if you've been doing it for a while, and you do feel like the hobby's something that's going to be for you for a long time, and you're really into it and you want to start setting up some decent tanks, these are some rules that you can follow to do it. So patience. What I mean by patience, I'll give you a couple of examples. A lot of us, when we're setting up tanks, we're working on a budget, and I've been very guilty of this. You want everything there and then. You want to set it up now. You want the finished product in your house. Bad idea. So what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. You go into your mate's house, you go into the fish shop, you see a big display tank, it blows you away, you think, right, I want that in my house. Trying to do it all in one go is a bad idea. This tank took me 3 years to build. Granted, it was set up as a marine tank to begin with, which does involve a lot of spending money and a lot of meticulous planning. However, even when I changed it and converted it over to the planted tank setup, or even the African cichlid setup as well, it still required me a bit of patience and a bit of saving money to get the outcome that I wanted out of those 2 different setups. So you can go into a shop, you want to buy a tank. You've got a specific size tank in your mind, but you haven't got the budget for it there and then. So you just decide to pick up the smaller one and bring it home and put that in your house instead. I guarantee you now, if you do that, then in a couple of months' time, you're just going to regret it and wish you got a bigger one and want to get a bigger one. So it's a good idea to use patience, save your money, and get the tank that you wanted. Don't try and do it all at once. The same thing goes for certain types of equipment as well. So lighting, if you've got a planted tank, return pumps, temperature controllers, your tank heaters. If you're going in and you're just buying cheap crap to try and get it all set up as quick as possible, you're opening yourself up to the likeliness of having different failures, or plants not taking off because you haven't got the right lights, heaters failing, pumps failing. You're better off just saving your money having a bit of patience and getting something that's half decent to avoid having sort of issues with equipment further down the line, it's worth it. Especially if you've been in the hobby for a while and you're wanting to set up a nice big display tank. Like I said, I'm not trying to say you have to spend money to be successful, and I'm not encouraging people to go out and spend a lot of money, especially if you're fairly new to the hobby and you're just sort of getting your feet wet in it. I wouldn't want you to go out and start, spending countless amounts of money to have this perfect setup when you're still testing the water, because you want to make sure that it's right for you and it's something that you really get into before you start splashing the cash on it. But if you turn around and you've made that decision that you want to start moving forward and setting up something nice, patience, saving your money and waiting for things for you to have the funds to get the good equipment and the decent stuff and the right size tank that you want and the right good lights that you need with the right spectrums on it for plant growth and other things, it's 100% worth it, and it does work. Another example of patience when setting up your tank as well is when you first fill your tank up, you've not really got nothing to look at in there, so you just try and get everything in there all at the same time. You go out and buy 30 fish, dump it in your tank, and then you end up having a crash. So patience comes into place with things like your nitrogen cycle as well. So cycling your tank at the beginning. A lot of us have been guilty of it, if we're all honest, when we've overlooked it a little bit and tried to rush things. I know I definitely have when I first started keeping fish.
The court finds you guilty and sentences you to be shot.
But what can happen is it can give you a massive catastrophic fail on your tank. All your fish die, you've wasted all that money, and then stuff like that can put you off continuing with the hobby. So this is really something that applies to everybody, is when you first fill that tank up with water, be patient. Don't try and chuck everything in at once and try and get the finished product straight away. It's not going to happen. It's a long journey before you get to these sort of really beautiful displays where there's loads of plant growth, or you've got these bright, colourful community of fish. The nitrogen cycle is one of the most important parts setting up a fish tank, and it does require patience. Even when you're using your bottled bacteria and things like that, you still need to let things stabilise, and you still need to be patient when you're adding livestock into the tank as well. Another patience pointer, this might not sound like a big deal, but trust me, it's caused issues on all tanks that I've set up early on, and that is in regards to your lights. So when we fill up a tank and it's a fairly new tank, a lot of us, we want to be able to see it. We want to see the scape in there. We want to see a couple of the fish swimming round. We want to see it all. Don't put your lights on for a couple of weeks on your tank. Leave them off. Let things settle in. Let the nitrogen cycle set in. Let the biofilm grow on all your scape. Because what happens is if you're switching your lights on too early, when you first set up that tank and you've got a light schedule on, it's not so bad if you've got quite a heavily planted tank. But if you've got like an African cichlid tank where you've got no plants in whatsoever, if you're putting these lights on too early on before this cycle's taken place in your tank and that biofilm's taken over, you can have a massive algae bloom, and the algae can really take over because it's got no competition on any of the surfaces in your tank. It's got the light going in early doors, feeding it. And in all honesty, when I've had tanks and I've set them up and I've done that and the algae growth's taken over early on, it's very hard to get on top of, and it can be very off-putting when you've got this ugly display full of algae early on when you're first setting up a tank, and it makes life difficult. So another thing with patience is just, leave your lights off your tank when you first set it up. There's loads and loads of things where patience comes into play, and it's so hard to abide by because it's so exciting to get this new tank and see it and watch everything swimming around. But patience is a massive thing, and the more of it you've got, the more successful you're going to be, and the more likely you're going to have a really good looking, long lasting tank that you're going to be happy with. Right, let's get on to the next one, the second P, which is planning.
Now I know this plan is foolproof. Check this out.
So planning is crucial when it comes around to setting up a successful tank. So by planning, what I mean is establish exactly what sort of tank you're going to keep. So are you going to keep an African cichlid display? What type of African cichlids are you going to want to keep? Are you going to keep a planted tank display? What type of plants and fish are you going to want in there? And then do your research on it. Look at other people's tank setups. Go on YouTube, watch some videos, and make sure you've got exactly what you need. So when you do your research, all tanks, depending on the fish you're keeping, are night and day in regards to what sort of substrates you want to use, temperature of the water, what sort of rocks you can put in there that won't affect your water parameters, or ones that will affect your water parameters in the correct way. With lighting, if you're keeping a planted tank, you need to plan to get the correct lighting so you can make sure you're getting the right spectrum to your plants to encourage them to grow. Are you going to use CO2? Is CO2 going to be an option for you? Is that what you're going to want to inject into your planted tank to help with your plant growth? What plants are you going to keep? Do they actually need it? Is it worth spending the money on it? So planning is crucial. The more research that you do, you know what equipment you're going to need, you know how it's going to be set up, you know what your water parameters are going to have to be, what sort of substrate you're going to get, what sort of money you're going to need to spend to set that tank up. And if you've got a plan in place and follow it correctly, you're going to be successful. Also, it comes in place with filtration as well. What sort of filtration are you going to use? Are you going to go for a canister filter? What sort of media are you going to need to get for that? How many canister filters are you going to need? How big's your tank? What size canister filter are you going to need? Are you going to have a sump? In which case you need to plan the sump, what it's going to look like underneath, what sort of flow rate you're going to need on your return pumps. Are you going to have any reactors? How are you going to plumb it in? So planning is very crucial, it's very important. And if you have a good plan in place from the beginning and you follow it correctly and double up with a bit of patience on it as well, then you're going to have a successful result from the start. Part of your plan also needs to be what sort of fish you're keeping as well. So what do you intend to put into your tank? What do you want? When you're doing that, always check the size that the fish grow to. So don't blind purchase the fish without looking at sort of how big they get. There's a amount of fish shops that will sell fish at tiny sizes and they grow into absolute monsters. So do your research on your fish, how big they're going to get, and then part of your plan can be what sort of tank size you're going to need, and then plan where that tank's going to fit into your house as well. Or alternatively, if you're starting off with a smaller tank, make sure you've got room in your house to upgrade to a bigger one if them fish start getting too big. So the third and final P which comes into play is persistence. So massively required when you're keeping fish. It comes in so many aspects. You're going to get errors, things are going to go wrong, you're going to get ugly tanks pop up, so you're going to get things that get taken over with algae that require constant cleaning. You're going to get tank crashes. You're going to have tanks that you're going to need to completely rip out and start again because you've had an algae takeover or an algae bloom. You're going to need to be persistent in maintenance like glass cleaning, water changes. So persistence is massive in the hobby. You don't want to be put off if something goes wrong, or you have a crash, or you make an error, which we all do. We're all guilty of. This journey isn't smooth. There's going to be bumps in the road. Things are going to happen. But if you're persistent with it and you don't give up and you don't just decide, oh, it's not for me, You really will enjoy it. The more experience you get, the less you're going to have certain problems, and you're going to know how to deal with them in better ways as well. So be persistent, and you'll have great success in tanks and fish in general.